Hello everyone, I am Tacet, and today I'm going to be going over the new hero class of the Frostmage, as well as some teams for it, and the weapon, because the weapon is somewhat relevant this time around. As far as the event itself, we are stuck having to use glacial peak troops that are also Fey, so we only have about 7 options to choose from. As far as the actual things to obtain, same rewards as always, but we of course have the new weapon. You could either get this with 250 wins or by buying it directly, and for once it actually isn't that bad as far as mythic weapons are concerned. It deals a decent amount of damage to all enemies, and then gains 5 additional damage for every single frozen enemy, which is obviously a maximum of 20, assuming that they can all be frozen, so that's a pretty competent amount of damage, almost about the same, or actually a little bit higher than that of Dawnbringer. The hero class itself has Arcane, so you can bring that even higher on top of that, and overall is pretty nice. So as far as teams for the event, since I've already used all the battles, we have these two. There's basically this one, which I've been using, which is Snow Guardian, Dawnbringer, Freya, mainly because it's a yellow, which gives us 2 extra damage on Dawnbringer, and Skady, but if you do not have that, you can also go the Titan route and just use Titan first slots with the barrier every single time you take Brown, and just use Mage with pretty much anything. It doesn't really matter what you have behind it. Of course, you could just go with something like this, or literally anything. As long as you're running Titan Mage with a with the barrier on, you're pretty much going to be safe from just about everything. And it might take a little bit longer, but it will definitely go down eventually just from spamming Mage over and over again. But let's go over the class itself, as it is a pretty decent one. So let's go over to troop menu, go over to class, Frostmage, and its talent tree. Actually, let's not go to talent tree first, let's go to traits. So, traits, 2 most noteworthy things. It has Arcane. It is the only hero class that has Arcane. This allows it to gain 1 additional magic every single time an ally casts a spell, including itself. This normally wouldn't be too big of a thing on a troop, but it is on hero because this can be used on any weapon in the entire game. So you can accumulate a lot of extra mana and then just throw down some kind of weapon that hits all enemies, and then, well, every single magic you're gaining is 4 additional damage total. So that can definitely add up to be quite a bit of extra potency on any kind of weapon, and can be used on any of them. Other than that, it has a 25% chance to freeze a random enemy whenever an ally casts a spell, basically meaning this hero class is mainly good with teams that are capable of constantly casting various spells over and over again, as you not only gain magic from doing so, you also constantly keep freezing the enemy team. Do keep in mind, this alone generally is not enough to fully freeze out the entire enemy team. You would normally want to have one other option on your team, either through a cast or something like a trait, like Queen Mab's final trait, in order to properly freeze, though this does now allow on any Guild War day 2 set of freeze option. Many Guild War days weren't really possible, like let's say a Queen Mab, you could only do it on blue or purple, but now with something like this, you'll be able to freeze on any Guild War defend day, as well as just in any instance, so very, very nice in that regard. And probably the main thing that it's actually going to be used for is defend for freezing enemies on days that tend to loop a lot, like on green Guild War day, for example. But anyways, as far as its perks, it is pretty decent. It's pretty far up there as far as the hero class is concerned, probably about the 3rd strongest in the game approximately. As far as the first tree, you would either go for freeze a random enemy at the start of battle generally, or you will go for the summoning of the random storm. Insulated is pretty good for the immune to freeze, though you could also gain 2 magic if you are in last slot. Next up, you would either go for the 20% spell reduction or go for the extra little bit of magic onto your yellows. Next, you would pretty much just always go for the half mana start, just because of how potent a half mana start is. Next, you would go for either the extra 4 magic to using artifacts if you're using an artifact weapon. And yes, that orb that this hero class gets does indeed count as an artifact weapon, so pretty good to use it with that. Alternatively, you can also use the Submerge or Random Ally on 4x5x matches, and this would basically just be the defensive route if you're not going with a artifact weapon. Next up, you have 2 different manas, though generally you're going to go for the better one of the Explode a Yellow every single time you take a extra turn, so that will end up accumulating a lot of mana and can help clear the board if you don't have other options on your team that can already do it. And other than that, the last trees are pretty useless. The one that you would most likely use, though, is all elementals gain 1 magic whenever an ally casts a spell, though to keep in mind, this hero class is a Fey, not an elemental, so it doesn't gain any benefit from that. And these other 2, just, you would never really use them in any kind of team, so not really much of a need to get it to level 100 for the most part. But that is that. Let's go and do some teams, as well as show the orb in action, as the orb is definitely not too bad. Definitely don't want to do it against Elspeth spam. Let's do it against this middle one here. So, one other thing, as I was mentioning, defend teams, it's not a defend team. You can use it with various defend teams. If you do, you want to use it in various loop teams. This is basically one that is pretty common already in defends that you could easily revamp to use this hero class if you want to on a given day. And as far as Troll Nyx, the new orb plus Queen Mab has plenty of freeze option on a day that might have a lot of loop going on, like a green day or something that you might need to counter out. Has decent AoE damage, and that the orb and the Queen Mab both have it. And we'll be able to loop between Forest Troll giving greens to your Nyx and then Nyx giving blues to your Forest Troll to constantly have the loops you need to not only freeze, but also to gain additional magic. And both your Queen Mab and your hero would be freezing and gaining additional magic, as both of them have a freeze option as their third trait and a arcane option as their second trait. So something like that could work for a Guild War Defend day if you wanted to go. But let's go into two teams that you can actually use. Overall, I wouldn't really say it's anything too over the top as far as things that you can use the orb for, nor the hero class for. It's mainly just a weapon that could be a alternative Dawnbringer for if you don't have a Dawnbringer, as well as a hero class that you just bring out for whenever you need freeze options. But right off the bat, we're going to be using Glaceon. I mean, not Glaceon. Well, we are using Glaceon. But Borealis, something that I haven't used for a while. Some people did request I make something out of it. So this was basically the best I could think of. Basically getting Glaceon or Dark Maiden up as quickly as possible. Ideally Dark Maiden, but where on earth is all of our mana? But we'll start working this up. We don't really want to take any yellows as we need them on the board, and of course every single move we have right now appears to be a yellow, which I don't actually want to take, but I guess we'll have to take one of them, get the last little bit of our mana, and then just kind of go from there. I believe we have alignment off those reds, and yes, so we'll go do that, get our thing right there. That'll give us all the mana we really need. This orb has a lot of perks too. I didn't actually end up showing those, but it ends up getting some reduction onto the first enemy. It ends up getting extra life. It ends up getting a freeze onto the first enemy. And it ends up getting a enchant every single time it casts. And it ends up getting a explosion onto a random blue. So it is a lot of things going for it. Mainly the explosion onto a blue and enchant make it a pretty solid weapon. It's definitely not too bad. And as you'll see here, we have a few freezes down there. We get a little bit of boost ratio with it. We get our one explosion. And it automatically gains enchant. So we can easily go and get it right back up again. As you can see, we'll get full mana on it automatically by next turn. See if we can get any alignment here. It does look like we have it off those yellows. Just keep getting more and more blue onto the board. And we can go for that cast right now if we want. But we'll go move that first, double check what we have. And I don't think we have a double drop because those Doom Skulls are just going to explode if we go for them. So I guess we'll just go for that. Clear out the really low one right there. I was hoping the explosion would end up doing something, but nope. Let's take a skull down. He'll take his own. We have double tank up front, so we don't really need to worry about too much. Take another skull, and we didn't even need to cast the Borealis there. But of course, Borealis would freeze all of them, which would allow us not only to do triple damage to all of them off of Borealis' final trait, but it would also allow our orb to do more damage as well. And here we appear to have another one. That looks like something kind of team he'd run for the event thing. I don't know if that's what he was using or not. But next up is Justice Team. Pretty standard team. Valkyrie, Justice, Queen Mab. Hasn't really seen much usage lately. I don't know if anyone still uses it these days. But if we're ever going to bother using this orb for something, this is definitely one of those kind of teams where we would bring it out. This team already naturally needs a lot of freeze, so going with even more freeze is going to be even better. We end up getting Justice here, which ends up giving a lot of HP as well as attack, which we'll be able to utilize. And one really nice thing about this hero class, or this weapon I mean, is the weapon will automatically freeze the first enemy, assuming you have the perks for it on the upgrades. So we'll end up getting to freeze right here every single time. And never mind, he's using Insulated, of course, because he's using the new hero class as well. But assuming he didn't have Immune to Freeze, actually, his entire team has Immune to Freeze right now. This is a bad example. I should probably just retreat from him just because of how bad of an example he is. Could have easily won, but that defeats the whole point of using a freeze team if his whole team is immune to freeze. Here we go, there's someone using Titan. Oddly enough, despite all the immunities Titan has, one of them is not freeze, so we can go freeze him. And of course, those things have so much extra bonuses this week, but should be fine. Anyways, let's go and move this over. Get a nice Valkyrie down. Looks like we have it right there on the purple. Get our mana. Not going to orb yet, though I guess it's not really blocking us too much if we did go for it. We're not using a Borealis anymore, so we don't get that triple damage, unfortunately. But I guess we'll take the skull off the top. Why not? Just to make sure he doesn't get it. Go get this thing back. Double check if we have anything there. Get our one explosion. Hopefully it'll help us. Not really, but we get our enchant there. Looks like we'll just get another Valkyrie and just land that into whatever our follow-up is. So we'll do that for guaranteed full mana by getting the two things to drop. Ideally have a Valkyrie somewhere here. Looks like we have it on green, as well as yellow, but we don't actually need green, so might as well get that off the board. If we have a free Queen Mab, take Queen Mab, go for that for the gigantic damage. And Queen Mab into Orb just wipes it out. We barely even needed the Justice aspect of the team. in that particular instance. But yeah, that's basically the Frostmage class. Definitely not a replacement for Titan, but pretty far up there as far as strong hero classes are concerned. Definitely one I would get leveled to at least a slight degree. You don't really need it much further than 70 though, so I wouldn't go further than that. 40 and 70 are like the two main stopping points, ideally 70. But because you end up getting that extra little bit of explosion and a bunch of mana off of that. But yeah, definitely a hero class to consider doing and getting up. The leaderboard's still pretty high though, but as far as actually leveling it by other means, like maybe explore, PvP spam, or anything like that, definitely worth considering. But anyways, guys, if you guys have any other questions or anything else you want me to go over, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a wonderful weekend. Goodbye, everyone!